Hello and welcome to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett and I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm good, David. It's we're winding down summer here in the northern hemisphere, and my kids go back to school like next week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we go back early in Tennessee, but
Yeah.
so there's been school supply runs and meet the teacher night. It's busy.
How are the kids feeling about that? I remember when I was a kid, I was never that happy about going to school. I kind of liked seeing my friends again, but
Yeah.
it was kind of nice, being home too. How's that go over in the Hackett household?
They're mostly okay. All three of them generally like school. And so, I mean, there's some like moaning, right? But I think it's kind of skin deep moaning.
Yeah. Okay.
They're okay.
All right. Good. Good. And then the parents are super happy. Go to school, kids.
Well, my wife's a teacher, so she goes back to work next week as well. Actually, she goes back to work, has already gone back to work by the time this comes out for like the in service, right, where teachers go and set up the classroom and have meetings and stuff. So her summer is over, but I'll have the house to myself again. So
nice. All right. Well, we want to welcome to the show Simon Støvring, who is a developer of many applications that many of us probably love, and also a Mac Power user. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you as well. Simon, you make several applications that I use. Runestone, Scriptable, Jayson, Data Jar, which is like an automator, Hall of Famer. Data Jar is that app that allows us to store variables on our mobile devices that Apple has never got around to letting this do. And you've also made some kind of fun projects as well we're going to talk about. But you are a prolific developer of things fun on the Macintosh.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess so. It's kind of a new thing for me. I guess building apps for the Mac. I've been focusing mostly on iOS the past couple of years, but kind of took up Mac development in November last year.
The thing you picked up last November is maybe my favorite app that you've made, Festivitas. That's the one that puts Christmas lights on your Mac.
Right. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I don't know. I woke up one morning just I guess honestly, if you want the true and sad story, I woke up a bit bummed with software development and computers in general. I certainly didn't feel like a Mac Power user back in November last year. And I don't know. I was kind of fed up with building software. I was fed up with the whole AI wave that was kind of, I don't know, coming in. And then it's just I just wanted to do something fun. I wanted to go back to what kind of sparked my love for software development when I was a kid. So yeah, I built Festivitas for fun.
Yeah, Stephen can attest to this. There was a lot of whimsy on the Mac back in the day, and when you released this app, it hit me in the feels, having fun stuff like that again. I wrote about it. I downloaded it. I did a labs video on it. I just want more whimsy, and so thanks for doing that.
Yeah, sure. It's fun because you two probably remember whimsical apps from the Mac, but I don't. When I was a kid, I had Windows computers. It wasn't until I was 16 or so that I got my first MacBook. So all my whimsical apps, I remember those from the Windows machines I had back then. But it's fun to hear that the same apps existed on the Mac, I guess.
Oh yeah. So how did you get into iOS development? I mean, looking through your list of applications, a lot of them have been around for quite a while now. A lot of them are geared towards power users and developers. But how did you get started in all this?
I've always had computers and development programming close to me because my dad used to run this. It was since I was a very small kid. He ran this computer repair shop just from our house, and then he also built some websites, e-commerce sites. But this is I don't know, 25 years ago.
Sure.
So that's
early,
a very long
early
time
internet
since
days. Yeah.
early internet days. Yeah, and he was just running this from our home, so I would always see him build some websites, repair the computers, open it up, and it always kind of, it was something that throughout the years we kind of, it connected him and me, right? We were at some point, I got quite interested in this, of course, and I really wanted to help him out. So he taught me a couple of things about computers, about writing software and so on, and then that has just basically evolved from back then, throughout the years. And then so I want to spare you all the boring details. You asked about iPhone development, so I'll just skip ahead and say when the iPhone was announced. When was this? Back in
2007-ish.
2007, yeah, something like that. I just immediately knew that I needed to get my hands on that. But as I remember it was only available in America or a few other countries back then. So it's super difficult to get my hands on it. So it wasn't until the iPhone, I mean, one thing was like physically getting it in my hands, another was
right.
affording it.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't available in Denmark, and even if it was, I couldn't afford it back then, honestly. So it wasn't until the iPhone 3GS that I got my hands on an iPhone. And I was super excited because the iPhone, I think it was, to me, it was like the first device where I could write software that felt like I could touch it, like this interaction, this smooth touch interaction. At least to my knowledge, it was the first device that kind of had that. We had touch devices before then, with styluses, and some also let us use the fingers, right? But it just wasn't good enough. That was my impression, at least. So when they launched the iPhone, it clicked with me, and I just knew that I had to get started.
So were you already into software development at that point, or did the iPhone kind of pull you into the world?
Yeah, honestly, I've been writing software since I was a little kid. I don't know, since I was 8 years or so. I started doing some websites, and back then it was in Microsoft front page. So that was just, drag and drop HTML, that sort of thing, static websites. Before that was even modern, I guess. At least the static websites we know today, right?
I remember front page. Yeah, I remember that stuff.
Yeah. Then I got started with some. So then when I at some point you just get tired of building static websites, right? You want them to do some more stuff. You want them to be dynamic. So I got started with some PHP. Then I wanted all the flashy transitions, animations, interactions, and so on. So I got started with some JavaScript to spice up those websites, and then eventually moved into Flash. So all of my development back then was kind of centered around the web. And I guess it wasn't really until I got my my MacBook. So I got a MacBook before I got an iPhone, and it wasn't until I got my MacBook that I kind of piqued my interest to build software, other kinds of software than websites, right? But for whatever reason, it didn't really occur to me that I could just write software for the Mac. I wrote some scripts back then, I remember, but no apps. I didn't use AppKit or something like that back then. But then I think it was the year after I got my first MacBook, I got my first iPhone. And that's really when I started building apps per se.
Did you go to school for it, or did you just learn it, at home?
So of course, my dad taught me a few tricks back then. But then when I was a kid, I went to the local library, and then I borrowed all the books that I could. I borrowed on different programming languages. I remember borrowing, a stack of books on PHP, a stack of books on ASP, and a stack of books on Flash and so on. And it was just lay on my desk, and I would go through them one by one. I think I've never read as much in the rest of my life as I did back then in that year or two. But yeah, I went through all the books that I could get my hands on, and I tried as many languages as I could until I found something that really clicked for me. And back then that was PHP. And then I've just kind of been developing ever since then. And then what was that? That must have been 2011. I started I took a university degree in software engineering. Finished that 5 years later, and then I've just been working full time with software development ever since, and with iPhone development specifically.
I'd love to talk about your suite of power user iOS apps. And I want to start with Runestone. This is a plain text editor for the iPhone, iPad, and Vision Pro. We're going to talk about development for Vision Pro and more power users for members at the end of the show. But I remember in the early days of the iPhone in particular, there was like a sweet spot of kind of basic text editors, markdown editors. They all synced with Dropbox, but that was all for kind of writing. It wasn't really for editing code. And Runestone, I think, really has made a name for itself in allowing somebody with an iPhone or iPad to edit actual code on their devices, just like you would on a Mac or a PC, with syntax highlighting and lots of great features. Was this something that was scratching an itch that you had, or did you see an opening in the market? Like, what led you to wanting to build a text editor for a phone and the iPad?
Oh, yeah. So I certainly didn't see an opening in the market back then. Actually, the story of Runestone starts with another app of mine, Scriptable, which is an app for writing JavaScript. And an app for writing JavaScript needs a text editor. And I have been using an open source text editor built on, an open source text editor built on JavaScript in Scriptable. So it's like one of those editors that you can also find on websites today that was wrapped in some Objective-C, and then you could embed it in your iOS apps. And I've been using that in Scriptable for a couple of years. And then at some point, that just didn't cut it for me. I wanted something more. I wanted it to be more customizable, and I wanted a better performance out of it. And you can't get that out of a JavaScript editor on iOS. So I started building my own text editor that I could embed in Scriptable. And the whole point of Runestone was to be an open source framework that anyone could embed into their text editor, into their iOS apps. And as I was building this open source framework, I was testing it in a sample app. And I would use Apple's default document browser. This is the document browser, the document browser that looks a lot like the Files app. So when you open the app, you see something that's very reminiscent of the Files app. And I would use that, and you would select the document, and then Runestone would kind of take over. Then I would have some interface in this example app to test all of the features like syntax highlighting, line numbers, showing, invisible characters like tabs, spaces, and so on. And at some point, it just occurred to me that this example app had kind of turned into the text editor that I wish existed for iPhone and iPad. Something that was a lot like TextEdit for the Mac, but just with a couple more power user features, like syntax highlighting, like line numbers, and so on. And then when I was kind of done with my open source framework, at least the version 1 of it, I just thought, why not release this app that I have already kind of fallen in love with? So that's kind of how it turned into a separate app.
So you accidentally made a text editor.
Yep, totally. Never intended to.
That's hilarious. I know in the early days of the App Store, there were a lot of rules around running, like a user running code or compiling code in an app. Did you ever run up against those rules? And if you did, like, how did you manage that? Or is what you're doing kind of separate from that issue?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish I had a great story for you here with me encountering some fancy issue here. But honestly, no, I never encountered any issues like that.
Great.
With Scriptable. So Scriptable just uses Apple's official and own JavaScript core that's available on iOS. It lets you run JavaScript. It lets you bridge those JavaScript types from the JavaScript language into native code. Could be Objective-C, of course. In this today, that's Swift types. So it's all like using official Apple frameworks. So that has never been an issue for me, actually. I have run into other sort of similar issues, I guess, though. So Scriptable is an app that kind of integrates with all sorts of different frameworks of Apple's frameworks that I can kind of get my hands on, right? So it integrates with, the calendar, reminders, speech frameworks, and so on. And at some point, I wanted to integrate with the health framework as well. So I wanted users to be able to write JavaScript where they could pull data from the health app using HealthKit and also store data in there, of course. And I had all of this sort of done and working. And then I wanted to release it. And Apple said, no, you cannot do that. This is not a health app. You're not getting this. You're not getting this on the store. I was like, nah, but I mean, it's not a health app, but it's sort of what people want it to be, right? It's not a reminders app either, but it just integrates with the reminders framework. So if anyone wants to write a script that integrates with HealthKit or uses data from HealthKit, I think they should feel free to do so. But yeah, Apple didn't agree. To this day, Scriptable doesn't support health data.
And that brings us to Jayson and data jar. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, sure. So we can start off with Jayson, spelled Jayson, which is just a funny wordplay on JSON, the document format, right? And it's really just an app for browsing and editing JSON. It really started as shortcuts utility because I found myself working a lot with JSON documents inside shortcuts. And I would fetch some JSON from the web in order to utilize it in my shortcut to process it and map it or whatever, display it somehow. But then when I did that, I wanted to debug it. I had to investigate how does this JSON document actually look. And in order to do that, I wrote some shortcuts actions that could display JSON documents nicely formatted, either in the app or in like an alert. And yeah, that was kind of the purpose of JSON. And then it's kind of turned into a more full-fledged app where you can also browse the documents inside the apps, and you can even edit them and save them and so on. So it's sort of like Runestone, but specifically designed for JSON. So it formats the JSON documents nicely, so you don't have to look at plain text. You can also look at some more structured UI elements that gives a better overview in some cases, at least.
And this app for me is like a lifesaver because I'm not a developer and I do bump into JSON files, through shortcuts and other automation stuff I do. And it always felt to me like I was trying to defuse a bomb when I opened one of those text files because it's like you hit the wrong button, you add a space somewhere and suddenly it just doesn't work anymore. And I had that experience. Right. And when you made this app and I'm like, if not only does it explain everything, it lets me edit it without screwing things up. Anybody listening who is on the periphery of this stuff, this app is a lifesaver. It's, you do that sometimes, Simon. That's one of the reasons I want to have you on the show is like, you just find that little itch for us. And like a lot of these apps are very low cost, but they're or free. And it's just I really appreciate you putting this together.
Thanks,
for people like me.
Yeah. I'm glad you like it. I had a lot of fun building this app because obviously iOS and the Swift language has, different APIs for parsing JSON documents out of the box, but none of those kind of cut it if you want to build a JSON focused app. So I had to write my own JSON parser, for example, so I could give better alerts to users. So if parts of the document couldn't be parsed, then I could kind of surface that more nicely than what Apple's APIs allow me to do. Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot of fun building that app, honestly.
And then I mentioned earlier Data Jar. It's an app that lets you save global variables out of shortcuts, which is shockingly not there. I keep thinking every year that Apple's gonna Sherlock this app, and they never do. And yeah. So like I've got like in it like my phone number and like just certain things that I use repeatedly in shortcut calls, where I don't have to like load them into every shortcut. You just call it through Data Jar. Back on the days when we ran the Automators podcast, this app seemed like it came up every time we talked about shortcuts. But again, just a super great little utility.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, it's honestly, I wouldn't mind if Apple Sherlock that one day. I think it's functionality that would live great inside the Shortcuts app, and it's seemingly a very simple app, but it was surprisingly difficult to me to build, and it's kind of complicated to maintain because it builds so heavily on top of CloudKit to ensure that your data syncs nicely. And I think that works well if you have, I don't know, a simple list of movies in another app that you want to sync, or I don't know, some health data. But because of DataJar's nature, where it's like infinitely nested objects with a kind of parent relationship. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too technical here or too much into the nitty gritty, but just this is it's getting quite unwieldy to sync all of this data, and I really intended it to be used like you do, David. You know, you store a phone number, you store some data that you just need occasionally, or you need in many different shortcuts. But trust me, people have built very large databases on top of this, surprisingly large, and yeah, it was never really designed to accommodate that, but somehow I need to accommodate it.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you deal with automators as customers, they are going to find the hairy edge of whatever you make. I think that kind of comes with the territory.
And yeah, and that is the beauty of it, and that's honestly why I enjoyed it. It might sound like I'm just complaining here. That's not my intention. That's why all of my apps, at least most of my apps, have a developer focus. I like to build apps that I use myself. I like to build apps that for people sort of like me, for people, creative people who are automators, who build shortcuts, who build scripts, and so on. And part of the joy is just seeing people's creative uses of these apps. It has blown my mind what people build with DataJar. It has blown my mind what people build with Scriptable. I like getting those emails where people are just like excited to say, "Hey, look, I built this little hack that makes whatever website better for me," and so on. Yeah, that's why I do it.
I mean, you're definitely one of us. You know what I mean? It's like not only is it that you make the nerdy tools for us, but you also make the nerdy toys. I don't know how to describe this new app you've come up with, Smash Smash. I mean, I guess the setup would be, have you ever been so mad at something on your Mac that you just want to take a hammer and smash the screen?
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it either, honestly.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Looking at your portfolio of apps, I mean, you've got these developer apps, you have your fun apps, which, you know, you described a few minutes ago. Sometimes just come out of frustration or just wanting to do something a bit different. But something else different you've done is a couple of these apps have been brought to the Mac. And I would love to know how that process has been. Are you using Mac Catalyst for that? Are these Swift UI apps on their own? Like, how has that process been?
So all of these apps are actually brought to the Mac with Mac Catalyst.
Okay.
I started the work on these before. Well, honestly, before I had enough faith in Swift UI. So many of these apps are from the early days of Swift UI, where it had a lot of rough edges, right?
Sure.
Certainly today I would build them with Swift UI to the extent that I can. But back then I think Mac Catalyst was like the only good choice for me for these apps, honestly. That was a lot of fun. I think it was a lot of fun bringing these apps to the Mac, especially, or not especially, but also with Mac Catalyst, because it was quite a joy to see the platform, the frameworks, UIKit and other frameworks that I had fell in love with on iOS suddenly being ported to the Mac with Mac Catalyst. It was like all of a sudden it was like a new playground for me, right? And I didn't even have to learn any new frameworks, really. I mean, of course there are some differences with Mac Catalyst's UIKit and iOS's UIKit, but they're so minor that it kind of comes natural. So bringing these apps to the Mac was kind of an obvious thing to do when Mac Catalyst launched, especially for a tool I would say like DataJar that syncs data from all of your devices, from two iPhones, an iPhone and an iPad, I mean, that should also be available on the Mac, so you can have your data everywhere. But I mean, today I would certainly use SwiftUI, and I also build my apps and new features in my existing apps with SwiftUI. It's yeah, that's the only natural thing to do. That said, though, I am and I mean, people who have been following along on my social medias for a couple of years know that I've been working on bringing Runestone to the Mac, and that has been dragging out for several reasons. And I guess one of them is that I do have to learn a new framework. I do have to learn a couple of new frameworks for this, because I intend to bring it to the Mac using AppKit, because I think that's where I can give the most Mac-like experience today.
Developers really have a lot of choices when it comes to bringing an app to the Mac. So Mac Catalyst lets you bring your iPad app over. You can do SwiftUI. You can do AppKit, which is sort of the classic environment. Not the classic environment as in macOS 9, but like that's the traditional environment in macOS. And you've got web technologies on top of that. Like really, I feel like Apple's done a pretty good job at giving developers of all types, of all stripes, options on the Mac. And Apple uses a bunch of this themselves. A lot of Apple's apps that have come over to the Mac are using Mac Catalyst, right? Messages is probably the most popular. It's a Mac Catalyst app, and you would never know, right? I mean, if you're just a regular Mac user, just bebopping around between Mail, Messages, and Safari, you don't have to worry about the underlying technology, because Apple's done a lot of work to unify them at the user level. And that means someone like you who's got years of experience on iOS and iPadOS, you can bring things over and not have to reinvent the entire wheel. And that's good for the Mac, and it's good for developers.
Yeah, I think it has kind of been, people have been looking down a bit on the use of Mac Catalyst because we had SwiftUI like basically at the same time saying, and Apple kind of saying that was the preferred way of building apps in general, right? And also, I guess, bringing apps onto the Mac. But as you say, I think some of Apple's apps are a proof that you can certainly use Mac Catalyst to bring over your existing iOS apps without too much of a compromise, I would say. There might be some rough edges with Mac Catalyst here and there, but for the most part, you can smoothen them out.
But this is especially true in an app like DataJar, which is really a shortcuts utility. It doesn't need a big user interface, right? You just need to be able to see your data elements. And I mean, I felt like that is like such a perfect example of an app that works with Catalyst.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think you can definitely see and feel on DataJar that it was built with Mac Catalyst. It doesn't have that totally native Mac and AppKit look, but that wasn't really the ambition either. The ambition was to bring it to the Mac, honestly, as fast as I could, with as few compromises as possible, but also knowing that I would need to make some, because ultimately this was a task of bringing people's data to the Mac. And yeah, you're not really supposed to use DataJar, the main app, as much.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform designed to help you stand out and succeed online. So whether you're just at the start of something, or maybe you're scaling up your business and project, Squarespace gives you everything you need to claim a domain name, showcase your offerings with a professional website, grow your brand, and get paid all in one place. I've been using Squarespace since the beginning of time, and I truly love building projects on it. All the design tools work together, so you can make a really cohesive website to match your branding, and it doesn't require a computer science degree to work on this stuff. A lot of it's drag and drop. Now, you can drop in and do custom CSS and code injection and things if you need to, but most people don't and never will. And Squarespace makes it really easy for everyone to build a website. And you can get that website discovered quickly with integrated SEO tools, because you don't want to build a beautiful website just for no one to show up. That's why every Squarespace website is optimized to be indexed with meta descriptions and auto-generated sitemap and more, So people find your site through search engine results, and you can keep track of that traffic with built-in analytics. They highlight the stats that truly matter with an intuitive built-in set of analytic tools. It makes it super easy to review website traffic, discover where people are coming from, learn where to focus engagement, and you can even use it to track revenue from things like bookings, invoices, and product sales. So if you have a project, company, a brand, and you need a website, go to squarespace.com/MPU for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain name. That's squarespace.com/MPU and the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of Mac Power users and all of Relay.
So, Simon, I'm always interested to talk to developers after WWDC. This year, there were a lot of announcements. What's your impression?
Oh yeah, certainly a lot of new things this year. Honestly, I'm quite excited this year. I'm very excited this year. Honestly, going into DubDub, I was a bit skeptic for various reasons. I was a bit skeptic about this rumored redesign, and I do have mixed feelings about it today also, but also with Apple's kind of history around Apple Intelligence and not shipping some of their frameworks, their features, and so on. I was a bit skeptic going into this, but after DubDub, just after the keynote, it was quite clear to me that this is the most exciting DubDub DC that we have had in. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about it earlier today. I think it was like last time I was this pumped about it. DubDub DC must have been in, I don't know, 19 or so. Yeah, I think there are a lot of great new things. Of course, liquid glass, that's the obvious one, right? And that's certainly going to require a lot of work to adjust our apps to adopt this new look. To be honest, I haven't started. Yeah, okay, I have started a bit, but I haven't really. I haven't gotten far with adopting liquid glass in my apps, and I don't expect to get far before the launch of iOS 26, macOS 26, and so on, because there's still a lot of rough edges with the new UI frameworks and the design in general, right? I mean, we've all seen this, how people are discussing the design changes, and some people love it for good reasons, and some people are bashing on it also for good reasons, and I hope that. That I can kind of delay this work a bit until things have settled, until we have more questions answered about this design. But I will say I think it's mostly refreshing. It's mostly a refreshing design, but with some obvious flaws about readability, right? But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they can smoothen some of these out.
It's also a bit of a moving target right now. Every beta, like Apple, moves the slider of how liquid is it? Is it frost or is it liquid? And it seems like they were going increasingly making it frosty, and then now it's a little more liquidy. And that, like, what's going to be the next beta?
Exactly.
I've talked to a lot of developers who are like, I'm just going to wait until Apple kind of settles on what they want with this before I get too serious about what I'm going to do with it in my app.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's my take as well. I think, honestly, I think I'm gonna have to enable this. What's the flag? Runs in compatibility mode or whatever on some of my apps, and then have some updates out with like minor changes when iOS 26 launches, and then run them without the design refresh for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a month after the launch, and then really get started then.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. But there's the underhood stuff that you were mentioning as we were prepping for the show that I think a lot of listeners may not be aware of. Like, talk about the changes with widgets.
It's kind of a small thing, but it has been surprisingly, it's been one of my favorite things coming out of WWDC. Of course, there are some visual changes to widgets with the design refresh, right? And they brought widgets to Apple Vision Pro. That's also exciting, I guess. But what's more exciting for me is actually that now we can update a widget using a push notification, and it sounds it might sound a bit boring, but I think as a developer, this is quite exciting because up until now, the way we have updated a widget with new data, right? So say you have like a widget that shows your energy consumption throughout the day, then it would have to reload on a timeline. Basically, you would have to say in advance, you would have to estimate when you expect new data to be there, when you want it to be refreshed, and then it's sort of up to the system to decide if you're actually going to get this refreshed. That's a whole thing where refreshing widgets or reloading widgets, that's really handled by the system. And as a developer, you cannot dictate when that happens. Now, we're getting a little more fine-grained control over that in iOS 26, where just as you can send a push notification to an app, you can now send a silent push notification to a widget. So it's not like it's going to show up, but you can send this you can send this push notification and then ask the widget to refresh. I've tested this out. This piqued my interest for several reasons. I'm working on a new project where this will play a key part, but also in some of my kind of for some of my existing projects, I guess that's more in like my day job. So in my day job, I'm working at an agency where we build mobile apps, and I think this is really interesting.
Like as an example, I've always felt like when it came to calendar apps, the Apple Calendar app has an unfair advantage when it comes to widgets because it was always up to date. Temperature and weather apps are the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they always get like this, the data is always updated. Whereas you put a third-party calendar app or a weather app, it may not be up to date. And so as a result, you just don't use their widgets. And as I understand it, this is going to even the playing field. So our third-party widgets are going to be more useful to us.
Certainly, and I think the weather widget is a great example. If you have a weather widget, then you definitely want it to be up to date, right? So any app could have a service running in the background on like a web server somewhere monitoring the weather, and then send a push notification when it changes. Like either when it just changes or when it changes significantly to ensure that you have fresh data on your device. Now, from my testing, it works sort of the same way as previously, in the sense that a push notification doesn't refresh the widget right away, instantaneously, but it is refreshed the next time you look at it, basically. Or the system sort of guarantees that it's refreshed the next time you look at the widget. So yeah, widgets work in mysterious ways.
Well, I mean, like to me, I know I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, but I feel like what has happened with widgets is kind of an example of Apple at its best, where they introduced the Swift UI, then they brought a Swift UI widget system, and they introduced that a few years ago. And then since then, they've just been leveraging that widget system everywhere, where you're getting widgets on your Mac, on your iPhone, on your iPad. Now you're getting widgets essentially on the wall on your Vision Pro. You're getting widgets on the Apple Watch not complications, but the Apple Watch faces now. And like they're taking like the developers who have made widgets and they're saying, okay, you made that thing. Now we're going to let you use it all over the place. And then it's tying into Apple Intents, which is also going to feed, artificial intelligence and shortcuts. So it's like you see this kind of momentum building out of a very simple thing to start out with. Let's make widgets, but it feels to me like we're getting a lot more under the hood with that stuff.
Yep. That's right. I think you mentioned App Intents, and I think that's certainly one of the key technologies to be looking out for as a developer in like this year and the next few years. Honestly, it probably has been for a couple of years already, because that's powering a lot of Apple's new features. And I think it's quite easy to see how this could be powering more features down the road, but also new devices.
Yeah, it is really interesting to watch. In many ways, the iPhone forever has been sort of parallel buckets, right? Like you go into this app, you go to the home screen, you go into this other app. And in iOS 8 with extensions, you started seeing a bit of cross-pollination, right? Okay, I'm in one app, I can send this data to another app and I get a little piece of its UI. And widgets and app intents are pushing that even further. And when you layer, a future magical version of Siri on top of all of this, what we're really seeing is a breakdown of the walls between those buckets. Apps are still sandboxed, right? Their data is still their own, but Apple is giving users new ways to move information and move fluidly in between applications and even information on the web, and kind of putting all of those together in new ways. And that's really exciting, I think, because those are things you can do much more easily on macOS or Windows, but having it on a mobile platform has been a little bit slower to sort of catch up. And I think it's really clear that that's the direction that Apple is pushing and where they want to go. It's been in fits and starts, and until the new Siri gets here, we kind of don't see like the grand vision of it. But I think it's really clear that developers are being asked to kind of break their apps down into these fundamental sort of core parts so they can interact with the system or other applications as the user sees fit.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is also an aspect of Apple's frameworks and of iOS and the other operating systems, where Apple has really listened to developers throughout the past couple of years, because this API has evolved so much since it was introduced in 2018, if I remember correctly. I think the intents, kind of as we know them today, started out as these intent extensions, and they were introduced in 2018 when shortcuts launched along with Siri shortcuts. And back then it was such a mess, and there were so many restrictions on what you could do as a developer. And then throughout the years, Apple has really evolved this technology. There was a couple of years where it was honestly very rough to use, because it changed so frequently and it broke in so many ways. Honestly, I had almost given up on using it in my apps, because the experience as a developer was so rough. I knew that the core of my apps would break in new ways every year, and even on minor releases of iOS. But this year, I'm very excited about it again for the first time in many years, because it's quite stable, this intense framework this year, and it's very powerful what you can do with it. So yeah, it's quite clear that Apple has put a lot of effort into improving this, and at least in my mind, I think it kind of deserves a second chance, because I had really given up on it, but I definitely foresee a bright future for this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see how the new series gonna utilize this. But I'm also looking forward to see how new hardware products are gonna use this, because I refuse to believe that this won't play an important part in Apple's upcoming products.
Yeah. I mean, do you see often, like watching WWC, if you're kind of been developing for Apple stuff, you kind of see tea leaves of future products and ideas coming out of the recommendations they're making to you. And I was curious, do you see any of that with the announcements this year?
I think the most obvious one is actually what we're discussing now, the app intents along with the widgets, and sort of the widgets sort of more shortcuts focused parallel, which are these snippets. It's basically building on top of the same technologies. Snippets are building on top of Swift UI and intents. But instead of being widgets that are shown on your home screen or lock screen or Apple Watch, and even in CarPlay now, they're showing sort of as a UI that's running within shortcuts. And not only within shortcuts, right, but also if you're like interacting with it from Siri. So everywhere like Siri or shortcuts is involved. And developers are presenting UI, they're presenting these snippets. And this year, new this year, is that those can be interactive. And it might sound a little wild if you're not kind of keeping track of this, but up until now, any UI presented within Siri and shortcuts couldn't really be interactive per se. But to this year, developers can now put buttons in them to, do small transitions or transactions. Apple has an example where they're running a complete booking flow for like a travel app, where they book a a journey somewhere in some mountain, I believe, selecting the number of tickets, selecting the dates, and so on. And then by the end of this flow, they've booked tickets. And this is a flow that could be running within shortcuts or within Siri or within new hardware that Apple might launch. Of course, it can also run on the Mac, right? And this uses the same technology that was updated this year as well as widgets do.
Yeah, no, I see it. And like, I think that also kind of shades into whatever they're playing with Apple Intelligence. Clearly something went wrong. Siri didn't get the brain transplant, but once it does, I feel like that stuff suddenly becomes infinitely more valuable to users and developers.
Yeah, definitely.
The other one that stands out for me is just, I feel like the expansion of widgets also, I think, leans into a folding device of some sort. Like, I mean, there's so many rumors of a folding phone. There's more distant rumors of a folding iPad. I feel like we're going to have various new screen sizes on these devices, and they're starting to lean into ways to use that space wisely through widgets.
Yeah, certainly. I think, was it Samsung who had a device where you could, but it was like a folding device, but then on the outside there was still a small screen.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be obvious that you could place like a lock screen widget there, right?
Yeah, and that's the rumor for the iPhone Fold 2 that's going to have 3 screens. It's going to have 2 on the inside and 1 on the outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm for it. I think it's all super interesting, and as those widgets become more powerful, that becomes really potentially useful on the outside screen. I know the Motorola Razr does that, and you could do simple things there, right? Like the example I always think about when I think about the use case here is like going through the grocery store or the market with my grocery list, right? And I'm like looking for things and checking things off, and reminders is great because it sorts by area of the store. So like it puts all the produce together and all the meat together, right? It's fantastic. Like having that on the outside of a phone where I don't have to open it and see other things, right? It can stay active, because it's like the worst thing in the world when your phone like falls asleep in the shopping cart and you gotta it's like, oh no, what am I supposed to get? Especially if you're like me and the second you walk in the grocery store you're overwhelmed and like forget what the one thing you went in there for.
Yeah.
But as widgets become more interactive and more powerful, and you start to mix it with these form factors like the rumored smart home hub, or like, it's some sort of screen mounted on the wall in your kitchen. And basically, from the beginning, it's been rumored that app intents and widgets are going to power that device. It doesn't make sense necessarily for that to be, a home screen with a bunch of apps. Maybe that will be there. Maybe just the primary interface will be widgets and the app intent stuff. But I think that's all really compelling. And I feel like this year, after WWDC in particular, Liquid Glass has taken over the conversation, but there's all this stuff. There's all the cool stuff in macOS, like Spotlight and the menu bar, really a menu bar manager that they're building in Tahoe. Lots of really great, like fundamental technology stuff this year. And yeah, the design stuff is like back and forth. And I totally get what you're saying about not wanting to sink a lot of time into it. But that doesn't mean there's not other things to be excited about this year as well. Yeah,
certainly. And, I think you're right that app intents and widgets, in some way or the other, are gonna play a key part in whatever HomePod is gonna, like, whenever they have a HomePod with a screen, right? I think that's definitely what's gonna drive those the third party apps on such a device. Could also easily see if Apple ever manages to release some more AR glass like glasses, or AR glass like Apple Vision Pro, this could be it. I'm really excited about this. And that's also why I'm spending most of my summer diving into these app intents, diving deeply into widgets to learn what's new there.
And it feels to me like the timeline got disrupted because I think AI, Apple Intelligence, and a smart Siri is a gating issue for these things. And they've got to get that out the door before they can really put the gas down on how you can use that stuff. But at the same time, I feel like they've got the memo and they're working on it. And we'll probably get that fixed this year. I mean, next year.
I mean, launching a new HomePod and branding it with Siri would be quite the embarrassment today, wouldn't it?
This episode of the Mac Power Users is also sponsored by you, the listeners. Specifically, I'm talking to you More Power Users subscribers. With a More Power Users subscription, you get an ad-free version of the show every week with extended content. Not only that, you get access to the bonus episodes and all the other bells and whistles Relay gives to its membership supporters. Most importantly, you're helping me and Steven keep the lights on here at the Mac Power Users. We put a lot of time, money, and effort into making these episodes fantastic for you, and your support helps make that possible. So we want to thank all the More Power User supporters, and if you haven't joined as a More Power User supporter, maybe you should check it out. You can sign up over at relay.fm/MPU. We'd love to have you on board. I wanted to Steven mentioned Spotlight, and I know you're you're an automator in addition to being a guy who makes automator apps. Have you played with the new Spotlight in the betas? What do you think of it?
I've actually played a lot with Spotlight in the betas. As soon as I saw the Spotlight, the changes to Spotlight, I knew I had to try it out. I've been a long time user of Alfred and then Raycast recently. And I've been happy with both of them. But I like trying new things, and I like trying after I adopt up DC, when Apple updates their software, I like to give it a try. They always, because they are on these yearly cycles, the updates always seem quite big, right? And I think that applies to Spotlight this year. So since beta 1, I've been trying it out for better and worse. I think the new Spotlight is certainly the best Spotlight we've ever had. I mean, it should be, right? But I think it's quite exciting as well that it has the clipboard history now, that's part of Spotlight. I found that it works. I think it works good enough for most people. I'm still a little unsure if it works well enough for me. There's just minor things rubbing my gears. There's not one single shortcut to open the clipboard history. You have to do this, what is it? Command space and then press number 4 to go to select the clipboard history tab and so on. And yeah, that's just not great. But all in all, I think the changes to Spotlight are quite exciting. Also, not to start all of that up again and spend the entire podcast talking about widgets and intents, but those have also gotten a better place in Spotlight this year, right? Where developers can easier hook into Spotlight, and I think that's quite exciting. I hope a lot of developers are gonna grab that opportunity.
Yeah, my wife is the typical user, right? She's never gonna make a shortcut, but I can absolutely see her using the Spotlight intents. Like if I teach her a couple and they have a mechanism in there where you can assign a keyboard shortcut to it. I feel like, that is made for people who don't want to use shortcuts, but still would like some form of automation. To go back to the clipboard thing, I'll tell you, for me, it's such a non-starter because that has an 8-hour history. And I often want clipboard from yesterday, and I'm going to want a more powerful clipboard tool. But it's a start. And it's I can't believe Apple did this and didn't combine it with the mobile clipboard. Come on, guys, you're Apple. You have control of these platforms of all the developers. Yeah. But that's my least favorite part of it. But I do think that you're right. I mean, I feel like this is really a step up, and I think it's a middle path for people to automate who are not going to be full on hey, let's build a shortcut kind of people.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Spotlight, I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts on the new Launchpad that's kind of integrated into Spotlight, right? So Launchpad has basically disappeared as far as I can tell, and it now lives within Spotlight. Do we like that or not?
It's like the app collections on mobile. That's the way I look at it, because it collects them and organizes them. I don't think I need it. I've never, I think it's much better than the app launcher that we used to have. And for folks who haven't seen it yet, it puts within a little box on your screen all your apps, but it has a predefined category. So you can say show me all my utilities or developer tools or whatever. So like sometimes I'll admit once in a while I can't remember the name of an app that I don't use very often. You know which one always gets me this way, Stephen? Elsewin. You know, Elsewin, the app that gives you the list of times. I can never remember the damn name of that app. I actually write it down now. I have it written down in like Notion and a couple other places just because I can't remember. But anyway, off track. You can go into Spotlight now and find them that way.
Incredible. You mentioned something that I think is actually really interesting. You said, you know, it may be enough for a lot of people, but not enough for me. And that really resonates in the conversation about Apple's default apps. So things like mail, notes, reminders. And when we were preparing for this, you mentioned that you rely on a lot of those apps day to day. Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what is that to say? I think when we were preparing for this, first off, I'm very honored to be invited on the Mac Power Users podcast. But I'm not sure that I really qualify as a Mac Power user because I do use these standard apps. I use very few sort of fun utility apps. I like to stick with, you know, things like Safari, Calendar, Mail, the default Notes app, and so on. And that's basically because of the same process that I'm now going through with Spotlight. I tend to switch to these apps every year after DubDub when Apple has announced major updates to them. I take them, I kind of take them for a swing, right, and see what's new, and does it fit my needs. And for the first many years I was using a Mac, it didn't. There were better third-party alternatives, and I think for many people there still are. But I mean, things like I've been using things like Fantastical for many years because it was just the superior calendar app. And I'm not saying any bad things about Fantastical. It's still a great app. But as the calendar app has been updated throughout the years, it does what I need, right? So when I go through this process after DubDub DC every year, sometimes I just end up not switching back to the apps I used prior. And that has happened for, I mean, Safari, I've always been a Safari user, but it has happened for calendar, notes, and the mail app. I used to use Spark and I used to use the Bear Notes app, but those have just kind of slipped away from me after Apple has been updating their apps from year to year. And now I'm trying the same thing with Spotlight, right? I'm trying to see if it can replace Alfred and Raycast, and I think I'm soon ready to conclude that it can't, at least not for me. Yeah,
you know, the Apple, you know, I call it the Apple Productivity Suite, the basic apps they make. You know, this has been an ongoing thing we've observed on the show. I think at some point somebody in management said, you know, let's make these good apps. And it started with, I think, the kind of the notes rewrite and all of the apps, you know, reminders as well. They've all made significant progress to the point that a lot of people can get by very well without, you know, having to buy a third-party app for that stuff.
Right, yeah. But then again, I think this is also a point where people have some strong personal preferences, making lots of room for other apps like Bear, Fantastical, and so on to still have a great time on the platform and provide utility for those who just can't get by with Apple's apps. And I think for many, Apple's apps are also like a starting point, and then at some point it kind of rubs your gears in the wrong way, and then you look for alternatives. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it should be. And I kind of hope that's also what we're going to see with Spotlight. I hope that the clipboard history will be an eye-opener to many people who aren't using a clipboard history today and maybe missing out on some great stuff. And then they'll start using Apples and probably find that they, just like you, David, they do need a longer history for this to be truly useful.
Yeah, but I think the big takeaway is that Apple keeps raising the bar, so they're climbing closer and closer to those more powerful apps. Yeah. Which means that fewer people need to get off the Apple app. I mean, it's good enough. Like, I think Apple Notes is like probably their best app in this category. And it's just like shocking to me how good that app is and how stable it is, no matter how much data I throw at it. If I want to do handwriting, if I want to take a picture, it's like, it just does kind of everything, where I think it's really hard for me to justify a third-party notes app. Simon, we always like to finish these shows asking folks about some of their favorite apps and services. that bring you joy and delight. Why don't you lay a few on us?
Sure. So fortunately, this is one of the easier topics to prepare for me, because the app I always mention in that regard is Tot. It's such a simple app. It's made by Icon Factory, and it's their app where you get what was it? Let me just count: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different notes, 7 different colored notes that you can switch between, and then each note is just like a huge text field where you can put in any text. And unlike Apple Notes and other Notes app, you just have these 7 notes. So whenever if you ever fill all of them up, you'll have to release some of the context or just append to a note, right? And I think it's one of those apps that's quite difficult to explain because it sounds so trivial. It sounds so simple. It sounds, honestly, it almost sounds silly. Why wouldn't you just use a regular Notes app, or why wouldn't you just use text edit or whatever for this sort of things? But as soon as it launched, or when it launched, I tried it out immediately, and it has just stuck in my. It has been sitting in my dock on the Mac, and in my my dock on the iPhone ever since. And I use it several times a day. I think I use it basically every hour. Every hour I'm awake, I will open up Tot and I'll write some text. Most of my text starts there, even if it turns into an Apple Note or a note in Apple Notes later on. It usually starts in Tot. Slack messages often start in Tot. My Mastodon posts often start in Tot, and so on. I think it's a great place to just jot down a thought. Maybe some of them are like, I think I tend to regard all of my texts, or all text that I write, as like ephemeral, and then I'll figure out what I need to do with them. Do I need to post it to Mastodon? Do I need to store it in an Apple Note? Is this an email or whatever? But it always starts in Tot, and most often, or quite often, I'll just delete it from there when I'm done with it and not store it anywhere else.
Yeah, I would add to your points that, I mean, the mobile integration is fantastic. So like, you can work it on your Mac or your phone or your iPad or whatever. It's just seamless, and it's pretty. It's a pretty app.
Yeah.
I don't know, Stephen, is it time to add Tot to the Mac Power Users Hall of Fame? I feel like everybody loves Tot. I think it might be time to, add a space on the wall.
I think it is. I mean, I was just listening to Simon. I was like nodding my head along. He's like, yeah, I do the same thing. It's open right now with like this thing I was working on today. And this text ended up being copy and pasted into Slack, but it was like, I just need a scratch pad to kind of work on this temporarily. And it's so simple, but it is so good. And the colors, I don't know about y'all, but like I find the colors an easy way to remember something. So like the green one, the far right dot, that has links to like Relay membership stuff that sometimes people ask me. It's like, I just know that's in the green one. I was like, I just go there. It is really fantastic.
What else you got for us, Simon?
One that I can bring up is the, I'm not even sure how to pronounce this name. Lyre, Lire. It's an RSS reader. You probably discussed it on this show earlier as well. It works on both, or it exists for both Mac and an iPhone. And honestly, it's the only RSS reader that has ever clicked for me. And I only discovered this, must have been last year, where I sort of realized that my news consumption, I think like many people, was like in a weird spot, right? I was being more picky with the news that I wanted to read. So at some point I started reading less news because news are just sad these days, right? So I started reading less news, and then I realized that that's kind of a problem. Now I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in the world. I don't know what's going on in the tech world, and so on. So I needed to come up with a system, and I realized that it's time to revisit RSS for me again. So I tried all of the RSS apps that I've been trying throughout the past many years, and then I discovered this new app. Or it was new to me, at least. I think it's been out for a while. And it just immediately clicked to me because essentially it can be configured in many ways. And the way I've configured it is that I just, get a traditional list of all the articles that I have grouped in folders if I want it. But I always just use the all articles feed where I just see them chronologically across all of the feeds that I've subscribed to. But then once I select, and this is the killer for me. This is the killer feature for me. Once I select a news item, it opens in Safari View Controller. And I've discussed this with many people, and I haven't heard from a lot who actually want this, but I do. I think that's the best way for me to consume news. That's on the official websites, also blogs, and so on. Because then I get it the way that the writer intended it to be read for me. I'm not passing it through any of these, what are they called, readers and so on. I just go directly to the website. And I mean, this works on both the Mac and in the iOS app, and I use it in both places. But what's particularly nice about the iOS app is that the developer can use the default SF Safari View Controller in that app. That doesn't exist, to my knowledge, at least on the Mac. And the real killer here is that supports content bloggers. So all of the content bloggers that I use normally for, that prevents tracking and so on, they still work in Lyra, and I think that's one of the reasons that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try this app. I've never used Lyra or Lear, or I'm not sure what they call it either. But yeah, right. that sounds good. And then you're using that with InnoReader.
Yeah, so I'm using that with InnoReader. So I think you can use it in a way where you just store the feeds locally. I'm actually not sure about that, but I think the most common use case is to get a subscription for one of these online RSS readers or online like RSS services where you subscribe to a feeds and then you log into that in whatever RSS reader you use, in this case Lyra. And InnoReader is also a big part of the reason that RSS feeds works for me today, and I haven't done previously. InnoReader has a really good way of filtering news or filtering RSS feeds. You can set up filters in many different ways, and you can subscribe to, like, I have for some of my local news sites, I will subscribe. They will have different feeds for different kind of themes. So I might be subscribing to something that could be sports and politics and entertainment and so on. And then sometimes there might be an overlap between some of these. So they will publish the same story in multiple feeds. But then InnoReader has a great way of filtering duplicates between feeds. So I'll only ever see it once for one of the feeds. That's one of the smart things. You can also set up InnoReader to sort of scrape a website that doesn't have an RSS feed. Then you just scrape it and it kind of interprets the HTML to create a custom RSS feed that you can then subscribe to in InnoReader, and then that will sync to your favorite RSS reader. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough about RSS readers and RSS services to know if this is if any of this is special to InnoReader. But it was just the first time that I saw such good filtering that kind of clicked for me or stuck with me.
Yeah, and like InnoReader is a great way, because I've been struggling lately with Substack and my system. Like, it doesn't really work. Doesn't pull the subscriptions I want, and that. Somebody told me InnoReader does. It's like on my list of research tasks. So you have given me another poke in the right direction with that recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I just love how many great RSS options there are in 2025. Like, there was kind of a dark period there after Google Reader went away 100 years ago. And now there's like these really interesting options, and like, if you just scroll through some RSS apps that are on the iOS App Store, they all have different takes on it and different features, and I just I think it's great.
Yeah.
Tell us about Velja.
Yeah, Velja. I don't know how to pronounce that either, but could be Velja. So that's an app by Sindre Sorhus, an open source developer who's built a ton of small Mac utilities. I'm sure that's his apps have come up previously on this show as well.
Yeah.
And Velja is, Sindre Sorhus calls it a powerful browser picker. And I think that's exactly what it is. So the way I use it is, or what it can do is that it becomes your or it wants to be your default browser. So I have it configured as my default browser in the macOS system preferences. And then depending on the link that I open, it will open it will launch either the Safari browser, my default browser, or my preferred browser of choice, or it will open Google Chrome. Could also be any other browser, Firefox, Brave, or whatever they're called. I'm using Velia because in my day job, I use some Google services. We use Google Meet for all of our video calls. We occasionally use Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive, and so on. And I just find that those work a lot better in Google Chrome than they do in Safari. So I have set up so that all of those links open Google Chrome, and then everything else, even some Google sites, they will open in Safari. So it's not like whenever I open google.com, I will use Google Chrome. No, it will only be those particular links that open Sheets, Docs, Drive, Meet, and so on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Sindra Sorhus, I don't know if I pronounced his name right. We'll put a link to his website in the notes. All of his apps are great. I think that's another future guest if we can ever track him down. It's just
definitely do that.
Everything is so good that he makes. I mean, Supercharge is one I use all the time, but there's just a bunch of them. Yeah.
So the last kind of favorite app and service that I want to bring up is Claude Code. I think it's a new favorite of mine. I think it's still somewhat on the bench as to whether it's gonna be a favorite or not. But I mean, right now it seems like a good contender. So of course I'm just assuming that people know Claude Code by now, but I'm also guessing that there might be some that aren't familiar with it.
A lot of people don't, because a lot of people don't write code. Yeah.
So it's basically they brand themselves as a code collaborator. So basically, it's a command line tool that you can point to any of your code bases. Could be an iOS app, a Mac app, a web app, or whatever. I think it can do basically anything at this point. And then you will chat with it, like ChatGPT and so on. But the whole point here is to modify your code base, or even write new code, right? Start a completely new project, I guess. And I've been using it daily since it launched, I think, or shortly after it launched. And it has really... It's an interesting tool for me, because I think there's a lot of fuss about it these days, Claude Code, and I think AI-assisted coding tools in general, and even Xcode is getting a built-in coding assistant this year with Xcode 26, right? But I'm still mostly using Claude Code, and there's just something about it that works great for me. I like to think of it as like an alternative to reading documentation, Googling for answers, and looking up questions and answers on Stack Overflow and so on. And instead, I can just ask Claude Code, and then it will kind of scatter the web for me and come up with a question or an answer that is tailored to my specific context, to my specific code base. It will suggest changes to my code. Could be any of my iOS apps. And I've found that it's rare that I'll just kind of blindly accept these changes, or it's rare that they are exactly the way that I want them to be. But they're great. These changes, the suggestions it makes, are great for providing inspiration as to how problems can be solved. So I often use it as sort of can kind of imagine a co-worker sitting inside your computer where you can just collaborator where you can just kind of ask a question, and then you'll ping pong or bounce some ideas up against each other to find out what direction do you actually want to take this implementation in. What options do we have? What new powerful APIs in Swift can we utilize to implement this? And I think tools like Claude Code are great for that. Obviously, there are also people who are experimenting with implementing entire apps with it, or only building software through these prompts. I mean, I'm not there yet. That's not how it provides me value, but it does provide me great value as this collaborator, as you said, David.
Well, I think you're onto something. To me, just my general takeaway with AI is it shouldn't do the work for you, but it can be. And as much as I hate the term, a thought partner, it just sounds such an icky term. But say, oh, here's something I'm doing. give me some critique of this. And like it comes up with ideas, or here's some code I'm writing. What are some other ways I could do this? Or how do I get this problem solved? And Claude's code is by Anthropic, the maker of Claude. And for folks not kind of plugged into the vibe coding world, Claude is at this point in time kind of considered the best coding model. Although everybody's coming for it, Google says they're going to come for it, and OpenAI is going to come. So this is an arms race. But the right now, Claude seems to be one of the better ones, and a lot of people are using it in ways you talk about. But I think listeners can take that into their life and follow your lead. It's like, use AI to help you think through something, not to do it for you, and then suddenly AI can be actually quite useful.
Right, yeah, and I'd say even if you aren't a programmer listening to this show, but you are a Mac Power user, you might still benefit from Claude Code or a similar tool, because it's not only for writing code, right? I mean, if you find yourself occasionally opening up the terminal to write some commands or even a tiny bash script, then it can help you out. You can ask, any question about your operating system, and it will find a often appropriate command to kind of help answer that question, right?
And in terms of vibe coding, the kind of the term people are using for non-programmers to use something like Claude Code to write an app for them, I am much more skeptical of that, at least at this point in time. I know these things are accelerating and getting better, but I think that's fine if you want to make something for yourself. But I really think there's a reason people get degrees in computer science, and like there's already been some big stories of vibe coded apps that had security holes and things, because it's a little bit like playing with matches. If you're going to make something for somebody else to put on their computer, you got to know what you're doing. And that's just me, though. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on vibe coding? Is that something you've even looked into, Simon?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been looking into it. I've been trying it out. I like to keep an open mind, but I share share your exact same thoughts, David. I don't think we're there yet. Honestly, I don't know if maybe we will get there. I don't know. It's moving so fast these days that it's difficult to foresee where we're gonna be in a year. Maybe we will actually be in the day and age of vibe coding by then, or maybe it'll all have stagnated. I don't know, but I definitely share your perspective on we aren't there yet, and we probably, or we definitely shouldn't be vibe coding in entire apps with things like privacy critical features, right? I mean, we have recently seen cases where that hasn't panned out great.
Yeah. I want to run apps that like people like you have made that understand the whole system. I don't want to run apps that have been made by people who are really good at prompting Claude code. That being said, running it for yourself, that's fine. Make a little app that you want to keep for yourself. That's fine. The moment you distribute it is when I start getting worried. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Simon, and thanks for all the great stuff you do. Where should people go if they want to learn more about what you're up to?
I think the best way to find me is on Mastodon, where I'm at Simon BS. I'm also at Simon BS many other places, but Mastodon is certainly the place to find me these days.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, you can also find me on Simon BS, where there'll be a link to my Mastodon and also my Blue Sky.
We'll put that in the show notes. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsor today, Squarespace. Hey, if you'd like to be a member of the Mac Power Users and get the ad-free extended version of the show, we're going to be talking to Simon today and more power users about developing for Vision Pro. You can sign up for that over at relay.fm/MPU. We'd love to have your support. Help us keep the lights on. And we'll see you next time.